In this video, we are going to be previewing the wide receivers heading into fall practices. There's a lot to get to. We are going to name the best receiver of the group, as well as naming our breakout players and the top true freshmen of the group. David, this is an interesting group. A lot of guys returning, a lot of talented young players. It's an interesting mix of players. I'm curious kind of what you think in totality of this group, and also, talk about the totality, but also let's go ahead and knock it out. Name the best receiver of the group.
Yeah. I'll take the low hanging fruit and go with Mike Harley. I'm not going to make any headlines, I guess. I mean, I do think Charleston Rambo showed he can be a good player. I need to see more of it. And there's some other guys that I think behind the scenes Miami's very excited about. But again, I need to see it at this point. So I'll go with Mike Harley. He's, arguably, I mean, statistically, according to some advanced analytics, he is the top returning slot receiver in terms of production in the country. So I just think it's hard to not go with him right now.
And that's where I'm going to go with too on the best player. And I went with Mike Harley as well. And I think what's going to be interesting, and I think, just the production, leadership, a year
Yeah.
older, I think Charleston's going to bring some things to the table. There's no doubt about that. We saw that in the spring game. I think he had 7 catches. So certainly ability there. You like his speed. And then the guys with experience last year. But yeah, I'm going to say it's Mike Harley. And I'm going to be very interested to see if they're going to move him around a little bit, obviously working him out of
Yeah.
the slot. But I'm curious if they're going to put him on the outside a little bit, see if they can utilize his speed just to kind of move him around and also give defenses something more to think about, make them more challenging. And I think one of the things that stood out to me last year with Mike was he actually had, a lot less reps than D Wiggins and just slightly
Yeah.
less than Mark Pope. And I think if you're to look at it going into this season, I don't expect that. And I expect them to, I think Mike will lead them, lead the receivers in reps, again, assuming everybody's healthy, with Mike. But is there something that you think Mike can be better at or will be better at this year?
Yeah. I mean, I think this goes for all the guys who played at UM last year, and that's kind of making contested catches, making 50-50 balls catches. Um, I Mike's not the biggest receiver. I do think he's added some nice strength, weight, thickness to his frame in a good way this offseason. So that should help him be sturdier or stronger at the catch point. Um, so to me that and I agree. I think they will toy around with playing him more on the outside. And if they do, he's going to have to be more of that type of receiver that can win those one-on-one battles on the outside against corners. But I think, as we saw last year, as the season progressed, I think the last 6 games, he averaged 100 yards per game. I think he averaged a touchdown per game. And we've seen Rhett Lashley in the past, like at SMU, when he likes a receiver, he will feed that receiver constantly with James Prochet catching, I think, over 100 balls his final year at SMU. I don't know if Mike Harley's going to put up those type of numbers, but I do think there is a factor this year in Rhett Lashley knows what he has at receiver. I'm not sure he necessarily knew what he had there going into the season. He had to learn about that group. But going into this year, he knows he can depend on Mike Harley. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy that he kind of feeds constantly, like we saw the last half of last season.
And again, for just a reminder, Charleston Rambo transferred from Oklahoma, showed a lot of positives a couple years ago, and showed some flashes last year. But new situation here, and I know he's looking for a big season for Miami. I think we're both expecting him to be right up there at the top. Maybe that number 2 guy. Maybe he has one of those huge seasons. Again,
Yeah.
he's got the speed. Is a little bit taller than Mike. So he's got a little bit more height there that they like, but. I think he's going to have a productive season this year for Miami. I think when we talk about the wide receivers, and there's a lot to get to with the wide receivers. A lot of guys returning who played, a lot of young guys returning, the freshmen. I'm curious, the breakout player of this group. And I know for me, I had a hard time kind of identifying this guy. And I'm going to go with Keyshawn Smith. And I think he's a name that people know last year. He came up in
Sure.
a few spots that he has that downfield ability. That's what we heard, that he has a speed, 2nd-year player, a little bit more experience. Only a few catches last year, but again, drew those pass interference calls, has the speed. Although I want to say, I was tempted to say Mark Pope because I do think Mark's going to be better than he was a year ago. I still think that there's ability. I know people are down on him, disappointed in what he's shown so far, but I do think that he has a chance to do better than he did last year and really take that jump. And I think he's going to be certainly in that top three. I think he's going to be the guy that'll be a top three receiver for Miami. So it would not surprise me if he had that more of an impact or in terms of a breakout season. But I'm going to go with Keyshawn. I like his speed. I think they like him as well, and I think he's got an ability to make plays in this offense.
Yeah, I think there's people around who will tell you, and again, who knows what this means? It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have a great season, but people kind of think Keyshawn Smith is the most talented receiver on the roster. So will that translate into success in 2021, or will it be more of a 2022, 2023 thing? We'll find out, right? And I agree on Mark Pope. I think in the spring game, we saw him kind of work more out of the slot, which I'm intrigued by for him. I think that's a better fit because I think, we've seen that he kind of struggles to make contested catches, whereas in the slot, he doesn't necessarily have to do that as much. And Mark is a guy who is very fast. And, if he has ability to pick up some yards after the catch while on the run, he can hurt a defense with that speed. Um, you know, so I like those two picks. I'm curious, who would you, of those two, like if we're ranking, I think we agree Harley, Rambo will be the two most productive receivers, however you want to order that. If you're going to predict the third most productive wide receiver, um, which direction would you go on that?
Yeah, I would go with Mark. And again, I understand why people are hesitant with him. Like I get it. I watch the games too. Like he's got to produce more. He's a guy that to me, I know he wants to be good. I know it bothers him that some of these things haven't gone as well as he would like. I just think his ability is there, and I think there's
Yeah,
I don't think he's that far off, if that makes sense. Like I think that he's close. I think he has potential to have big games. I think he's got the speed. I really like his speed, athleticism. I would like when you talked about working out of the slot and give him the ball. Essentially, you want to see get him the ball early. I'd like to see him on short either slant patterns or even short outs.
crossing.
I'm not big on the bubble screens with him. I get
Yeah,
why teams do that. I would like to see him run in space and then catch
right.
rather than go from a standing spot, a standing
Yeah,
start, if that makes sense.
he can't really wiggle from what we've seen. Like stop, wiggle, make defenders miss, and then go. He could do that in high school, but for whatever reason, it hasn't translated to college.
Or even like a bubble screen, you're doing a stiff arm and really getting a guy off of
Yeah,
you and picking up 9 yards, or even something like that. That's not really his strength either. So I just think he's a guy that, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I do think that. I think sometimes, and this happens in all sports, like, guys get built up, and then if they don't do well, maybe players are never as good as you might think, and they're never as bad
sure.
either. So, and I think
Expectations.
that's
Yeah,
kind of where Mark stands. I think that he still has ability. I think he can, like I said, I'm expecting him to do better than he did last year. And I think if he does, that's really going to help out the group, the offense as a whole. So those guys, again, reasons to be excited about Keyshawn.
yeah,
More guys to get to. D. Wiggins, I think there's still intrigue with Jeremiah Payton.
sure.
He would have been my breakout player a year ago in this group. It just
Yeah,
didn't happen for him. I think Mike Redding is a guy that you got to keep your eye on.
yeah.
I think he's a guy they like. So, and he's got that physical side that they don't really have at the group. So I think he's a guy certainly to watch for as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was a fan of Jeremiah Payton coming out of high school. I think he's kind of had an unfortunate run of injuries at that have limited it to show what he can do. But you know, you've seen him out at practice when he's out there running routes during the times we can watch. It's impressive. Like he's explosive in and out of his breaks. He can create separation. He's just kind of had a snake bitten career with injuries. So hopefully he can get that back on track because he is a good player. And Mike Redding, you're right. He's kind of that 200+ pound wide receiver they have, the only one on the roster. And you could argue that was kind of a missing piece, you know, in the red zone in terms of the wide receivers. Now the tight ends can obviously get those red zone touchdowns, I guess, too, but it'd be nice to have a wide receiver that could come down with those jump balls / contested catches. And he certainly has the body and the jumping ability to do that. So I agree. And then, Xavier Restrepo was kind of one of the breakout players of the spring. He's just a dependable guy. Um, he's not going to wow you with his size, athleticism, but he finds a way to get open and he catches the ball and moves the chains. So, and those guys have value.
I do think that they are going to get to their goal of playing 6 receivers. I think that's the number to watch for in fall camp during the season. Before we wrap this up, just real quick, top true freshmen. There's 3 guys: Jacoby George, Romello Brinson, Brashard Smith. Who do you think is the best true freshman of the group?
I think the best one's Brashard Smith. I'm not sold he's going to get on the field because I think it's kind of stacked at slot, especially if they're going to put Mark Pope there. I would say Romello Brinson might have the best chance to play if the guys ahead of him on the depth chart are unable to catch the ball, quite frankly. So that's how I would view that.
And for me, I think Brinson is. I was kind of go the other way. I think Brinson's the best freshman of the group, and I think Burchard's a guy that could get an opportunity because he's, what he brings to the table out of the slot, kind of move him around a little bit. So it wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me to see him get a little bit of production. So a lot of receivers to get to. I think this is one of the most intriguing groups in terms of, a lot of different skill sets, a lot of different guys to choose from. It's going to be very interesting to see what the coaches do, if they really give these second-year receivers opportunities, if guys like Mark and D struggle, and then if Charleston is really going to push Mike as that top receiver. So there's a lot of tiers to pay attention to with this different receiver group. But I think they're going to go with 6. So a lot to watch for with this group.
I think you could argue too, Chris, like the ceiling of this team, the ceiling of this season is based on how these guys produce, how they step up. We saw against Clemson, they locked them down man to man with their corners and they couldn't get loose and make plays. Can this group get that done against those high caliber opponents this year? If they can, Miami can win 10, 11 games.
And last thing I'll say about this group, the one thing that I will say that I do like about it is I do think this group has speed, and with speed you can really
Yeah.
excel. And I think you got a quarterback that can get them the ball. So that's the thing that you like about this group. And there's multiple guys with speed, multiple different weapons. So definitely a group to watch for in fall practices.
Should be fun.